Arthur Sterling laughed off a minor business setback, believing his perfect life was unshakable. His young son, barely old enough to string words together, looked at him with tear-filled eyes. What the child whispered next froze the laughter on Arthur's face forever. The hum of the private jet had barely faded from the crisp evening air as Arthur Sterling stepped onto the tarmac, his mind still buzzing with the intricate dance of international finance and technological innovation. Weeks of relentless travel had left him utterly drained, yet a familiar warmth, a subtle pull towards the grand estate nestled in the hills, stirred within him. He longed for the quiet embrace of home, the familiar scents, and most importantly, the sight of his children, Lily and young Thomas. The driver, a silent fixture in his meticulously ordered life, navigated the winding roads with practiced ease, the city lights receding into a glittering tapestry as they approached the secluded property. Arthur found himself anticipating the usual joyful chaos: Lily's excited squeals, Thomas's gurgling welcome, and the calm, reassuring presence of Albright, their dedicated housekeeper, who had become an indispensable part of their lives since his wife's tragic departure. However, as the sleek car pulled up the long, tree-lined driveway, an unsettling silence hung in the air, a stark contrast to the usual welcoming glow. The grand house, a testament to Arthur's prodigious success in the tech industry, seemed to hold its breath, casting long, melancholic shadows under the nascent moonlight. He stepped out, his expensive leather shoes crunching softly on the gravel, a strange premonition coiling in his gut. The front door was ajar, a sliver of darkness inviting him into an unexpected void. He pushed it open fully, the heavy oak swinging inward without a sound, revealing a foyer steeped in an unnatural stillness. No welcoming shouts, no patter of small feet, only the faint, almost imperceptible sound of whimpering from upstairs, a sound that sent an icy dread through his veins, shattering the remnants of his professional composure. He ascended the sweeping staircase, 2 steps at a time, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The whimpering grew louder, morphing into choked sobs, unmistakably Lily's. He burst into the nursery, the scene before him a cruel tableau that tore at the very fabric of his being. Lily, his precious 6-year-old daughter, huddled in the corner of her crib, her small frame shaking violently, her face streaked with tears and fear. Thomas, barely a year old, lay in his own crib, his tiny fists clenched, his face a mottled red from crying, a faint, almost imperceptible bruise blossoming on his soft cheek. Albright stood over them, her back to Arthur, her voice a low, menacing whisper that sent shivers down his spine, a stark contrast to the saccharine sweetness she usually employed. "You will be quiet. Do you hear me?" Albright hissed, her voice laced with an unfamiliar venom, her hand raised as if to strike. Arthur felt a primal roar erupt from his soul, but it was Lily's small, desperate plea that truly pierced him. She looked up, her tear-filled eyes wide with terror, catching sight of her father. "Daddy, please, protect me. She hurts me every day." The words, raw and agonizing, ripped through the silence, echoing in the cavernous room and in the chambers of Arthur's guilt-ridden heart. Albright spun around, her face a mask of shock, her carefully constructed facade crumbling into a grotesque mosaic of fear and fury as she saw Arthur standing there, a silent, towering figure of disbelief and burgeoning rage. Arthur Sterling, a titan of the tech industry, commanded a global empire, yet his personal world had been irrevocably shattered 2 years prior. Drowning in grief after his beloved wife's untimely departure during childbirth, he had become emotionally distant, burying himself in work and inadvertently neglecting the very children who were living testaments to her memory. His wife, a woman of radiant spirit and boundless love, had been the anchor of his life, and her absence had left a gaping, unfillable void. Lily, his bright-eyed 6-year-old, carried her mother's vivacious spirit, but a shadow had fallen over her laughter in recent months. Young Thomas, the innocent catalyst of their profound loss, was a tender infant, fragile and utterly dependent. They were his world, yet his grief had erected an invisible wall between them, a barrier he now realized had allowed a grave darkness to creep in. Albright, the seemingly impeccable housekeeper, had stepped into this void with an almost unsettling efficiency. She was a woman of indeterminate age, her features sharp but often softened by a practiced smile, her movements precise, her demeanor outwardly deferential. She presented herself as a paragon of loyalty and devotion, a comforting presence who had seamlessly taken over the domestic duties, allowing Arthur to immerse himself in his work, believing his children were in the safest possible hands. He had seen her as a godsend, a compassionate soul who understood his pain and cared for his children as if they were her own. But beneath that veneer of dedication, a deeper, more sinister motivation brewed, a toxic cocktail of resentment, perhaps fueled by past traumas, and a ravenous greed for the opulent life she served but could never truly possess. He had been blind, utterly blind, and the realization hit him with the force of a physical blow, leaving him gasping for air in the suffocating silence of his own home. Arthur's blood ran cold, a tempest of disbelief and white-hot fury erupting within him, threatening to consume the very foundations of his being. He moved with a speed he hadn't known he possessed, crossing the nursery in 2 swift strides, his hand closing around Albright's wrist with an iron grip before she could even process a coherent thought, before her raised hand could complete its malicious arc. The air crackled with a dangerous tension, the silence now deafening save for the ragged breathing of the children and the sharp gasp that escaped Albright's lips. Her eyes, usually so placid and unassuming, were now wide with a terror that mirrored Lily's, a desperate, animalistic fear that momentarily stripped away her carefully constructed facade. Arthur released her with a shove, sending her stumbling back against the wall, his gaze never leaving her, a silent promise of retribution hardening his features. He knelt instantly beside Lily's crib, his heart shattering at the sight of her trembling form, her small hands reaching out to him as if he were a lifeline in a raging storm. He gathered her into his arms, feeling the fragile weight of her body, the frantic beat of her heart against his chest, and whispered assurances of protection, of unwavering love, words that felt inadequate against the magnitude of her suffering. He kissed her tear-soaked hair, inhaling the innocent scent of her, vowing silently that this nightmare would end, that he would move heaven and earth to ensure her safety. He then turned his attention to Thomas, whose cries had softened into whimpers, his tiny eyes still brimming with unshed tears. Arthur gently lifted his baby boy, cradling him close, his thumb tracing the faint, purplish bruise on the infant's cheek, a tangible mark of the cruelty that had permeated his home, a stark reminder of his unforgivable absence. Albright, regaining some semblance of composure, though her voice still trembled, began to stammer excuses, a desperate flurry of denials and feigned concern. She claimed Lily had fallen, that Thomas had bumped himself on the crib, that the children were simply overwrought because they missed him, weaving a tangled web of lies designed to deflect suspicion, her eyes darting between Arthur and the children, searching for any sign of a crack in his resolve. But Arthur saw through her, the thin veil of her deception shredded by Lily's raw, honest plea. He looked at Albright, his eyes cold and unwavering, a silent command for her to leave, a dismissal more potent than any spoken word. She retreated, her movements stiff and unnatural, the mask of the dedicated housekeeper slipping back into place, though now it was riddled with cracks, revealing the malevolent intent beneath. In the days that followed, a chilling quiet settled over the Sterling estate. Arthur, though physically present, felt like a ghost haunting the corridors of his own life, his mind a whirlwind of guilt, regret, and a burning desire for justice. He spent every waking moment with his children, trying to mend the invisible wounds, to coax back the laughter that had been stolen from Lily, to soothe the unspoken fears that still flickered in her eyes. He observed Albright with a meticulous intensity, noticing the subtle shifts in her demeanor, the way her eyes would harden when she thought he wasn't looking, the almost imperceptible flinch from Lily when Albright entered a room, the way Thomas would instinctively turn his face away from her touch. He saw her alternating between exaggerated subservience, offering overly sweet smiles and solicitous questions about his comfort, and moments of chilling cruelty, a fleeting glare directed at Lily, a sharp tug on Thomas's arm when she thought he was distracted. The once meticulously kept house now felt tainted, every shadow potentially hiding a secret, every closed door a potential prison. His nights were sleepless, haunted by Lily's desperate plea and the image of Thomas's bruised cheek. He began his quiet investigation, starting with the most obvious signs. He noticed that the nursery door now had a small, almost invisible latch installed on the outside, a detail he had never seen before, a sinister implication of confinement that sent a fresh wave of nausea through him. He checked the children's rooms, their clothes, their toys, searching for anything amiss, any hidden compartment, any clue that could explain the extent of Albright's depravity. His wife's memory became a beacon in his darkening world. She had been an incredibly organized woman, meticulous in her planning, always anticipating every need. He remembered her talking about a special box, a keepsake she had prepared for the children, filled with letters and memories, meant to be opened only when they were older, a tangible piece of her love to guide them. Could there be something in there? A hidden message? A warning? A piece of her foresight that could now help him? He knew he had to find it, to delve into the past he had so desperately tried to outrun for the sake of his children's future. His guilt, a heavy shroud that had choked his spirit for 2 years, now transformed into a potent fuel, igniting a fierce resolve to protect his family, to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The oppressive quiet of the Sterling estate was a constant reminder of the unseen battles being fought within its lavish walls. Arthur, now hyper-aware, watched Albright like a hawk, every subtle shift in her expression, every fleeting gesture, scrutinized under the harsh light of his newfound suspicion. He noticed the way her smile, once so reassuring, now seemed to stretch too wide, too thin, a brittle facade threatening to shatter. Lily, still fragile, would instinctively shrink away from Albright's touch, her small shoulders tensing, her eyes darting nervously whenever the housekeeper entered the room. Thomas, too young to articulate his fear, would often whimper softly when Albright approached, his innocent gaze holding a wisdom far beyond his tender months, a silent testament to the distress he had endured. Arthur's heart ached with a profound, searing guilt, knowing that his grief-stricken blindness had allowed such darkness to fester in the very sanctuary he had meant to provide for his children. He saw Albright oscillate between an almost exaggerated show of solicitous care towards him, inquiring about his meals and schedules with an unsettling sweetness, and moments of chilling detachment, her eyes hardening into cold, unfeeling stones when she believed herself unobserved, a stark contrast to the benevolent mask she wore for the world. One afternoon, Arthur found Lily sketching intently at a small table in the solarium, her brow furrowed in concentration. He sat beside her, his presence a quiet comfort she had craved for so long. She held up her drawing, a vibrant burst of chaotic colors that depicted a small, trembling figure cowering beneath a looming, shadowy shape. Arthur's breath caught in his throat as he recognized the fear in the child's eyes in the drawing, a mirror of the terror he had witnessed in the nursery. He gently asked her about it, his voice soft, careful not to startle her fragile trust. Lily's voice was barely a whisper, as she spoke of the dark lady who made her be quiet, who took her toys away, and sometimes, when Daddy was gone, would make her stand in the corner for hours until her legs hurt, or lock her in her room. The words, delivered with the innocent candor of a child, were daggers to Arthur's soul, each one twisting deeper into his already fractured heart. He held her close, feeling the tremble of her small body, promising her, not just with words but with every fiber of his being, that no one would ever hurt her again. His investigation intensified, driven by Lily's heartbreaking revelations and the gnawing certainty that his wife, in her infinite wisdom and foresight, might have left a path for him to follow. He began methodically searching his wife's private study, a room he had avoided since her departure, unable to bear the weight of her absence within its familiar confines. Every book, every drawer, every hidden compartment became a potential repository of truth. He remembered her penchant for secret places, for leaving little treasures and messages in unexpected spots. He spent hours sifting through her belongings, the scent of her favorite lavender and jasmine still clinging faintly to her scarves and journals, a poignant reminder of the love he had lost and the love he now fought to protect. He searched for the special keepsake box she had mentioned, a box meant to hold memories and guidance for their children, a tangible piece of her enduring love. His fingers brushed against a loose panel at the back of her antique writing desk, a desk she had cherished. With a gentle pull, it gave way, revealing a small, velvet-lined cavity. Inside, nestled amongst dried rose petals and a tiny, tarnished silver locket, was a stack of letters tied with a delicate silk ribbon, and a small, leather-bound diary. His hands trembled as he untied the ribbon, recognizing his wife's elegant script on the first envelope. It was addressed to him, dated just weeks before her departure. The words, penned with a loving hand, spoke of her hopes and dreams for their family. But then, a darker tone emerged. She wrote of her growing unease with Albright, a subtle shift in the housekeeper's demeanor, a possessiveness that felt unnatural, a strange, almost predatory gleam in her eyes when she looked at the children. She described instances where Lily seemed unusually withdrawn after spending time alone with Albright, and a disturbing pattern of minor accidents befalling Thomas when Albright was solely responsible for his care. She had dismissed them initially, blaming her own postpartum anxieties, but a persistent feeling of dread had begun to settle in her heart. The letter urged Arthur to be vigilant, to trust his instincts, and to protect their children above all else. She even mentioned a small, discreet security camera she had installed in the nursery, disguised as a decorative bird, after a particularly unsettling incident she couldn't quite explain. Her words, a voice from beyond the veil of loss, were a chilling confirmation of his deepest fears, a painful testament to his wife's unwavering protective spirit, and his own profound failure to heed the unspoken warnings. The diary, filled with detailed observations and dates, promised more damning evidence. Arthur clutched the letters to his chest, a wave of profound sorrow and fierce determination washing over him. His wife had seen it, had tried to warn him, and now, armed with her foresight, he would tear down every lie, every deception, to bring justice to his children and honor the memory of the woman who continued to guide him even in her absence. The path forward was clear, though fraught with emotional peril, and Arthur was ready to walk it, fueled by a love that transcended grief and a truth that demanded to be unveiled. Arthur's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against his ribs, the weight of his wife's words, penned with such prescient sorrow, pressing down on him. The mention of the hidden camera, disguised as a decorative bird in the nursery, was a jolt of cold clarity, a tangible lead in the fog of his grief and confusion. He returned to the nursery, his movements stealthy, his gaze sweeping the room with a newfound purpose. There, perched innocently on a shelf near the window, was a small, exquisitely carved wooden bird, its painted eyes seeming to watch over the room. He remembered it, a gift from his wife's travels, a charming trinket he had never given a second thought. Now, it held the key to unlocking the dark secrets that had festered within his home. His fingers, surprisingly steady despite the tremor in his soul, located the tiny, almost invisible lens and the discreet slot for a micro SD card. He retrieved the card, his breath catching in his throat, a potent mix of dread and burning anticipation coiling in his gut. The truth, he knew, was about to unfurl, and he braced himself for the painful revelations it promised. Later that night, with the house plunged into a deceptive silence and Albright presumably asleep, Arthur sequestered himself in his private study, the only light emanating from his laptop screen. He inserted the micro SD card, his hand hovering over the play button, a profound fear mingling with an unyielding resolve. The first few hours of footage showed ordinary scenes: Lily playing quietly, Thomas cooing in his crib, Albright moving about with her usual composed efficiency. But then, as the day progressed and the children were left alone with her, the mask began to slip. The seemingly innocuous bird cam captured Albright's true face, a chilling transformation from the solicitous caregiver to a figure of cold, calculated cruelty. He watched, horrified, as she would snap at Lily for minor infractions, her voice dripping with scorn, her eyes flashing with a disturbing malice. He witnessed her roughly handling Thomas, a quick, almost imperceptible shove against the crib bars, a harsh pinch that would elicit a startled cry, moments she clearly believed were unobserved. The footage confirmed Lily's heartbreaking words, showing Albright locking the nursery door from the outside, leaving Lily to sob uncontrollably while Thomas cried himself to sleep. Each frame was a fresh wound, a searing indictment of his own negligence, a testament to the suffering his children had silently endured. The most damning footage, however, came from the last few weeks. It showed Albright on the phone, her voice hushed but audible, discussing financial matters with someone, her tone shifting between conspiratorial whispers and sharp, demanding commands. She spoke of Arthur's assets, the children's inheritance, and her own deserved share, a chilling revelation of her true motives. She was not merely a resentful caregiver, she was a calculating predator, meticulously planning to exploit his grief and the children's vulnerability for monetary gain. The recordings also captured her rifling through his personal papers in his absence, her careful hands sifting through bank statements and legal documents, a brazen act of betrayal that twisted the knife of his pain. Arthur felt a cold, hard knot form in his stomach. The initial shock gave way to a simmering rage, a fierce, protective instinct that demanded immediate action. He had seen enough. The evidence was irrefutable, a stark, visual record of Albright's malevolence. Armed with this undeniable proof, Arthur knew he could not confront Albright without careful planning. He began to subtly change his routine, spending more time at home, engaging directly with Lily and Thomas. He would sit with Lily for hours, letting her draw, encouraging her to speak about anything that troubled her. He learned to listen with his heart, not just his ears, noticing the lingering fear in her eyes, even as she cautiously began to open up, sharing small, fragmented memories of her mother, of happier times. He would hold Thomas close, rocking him gently, singing lullabies, feeling the warmth of his baby boy's small body against his, a tangible connection that began to mend the emotional chasm that had grown between them. He saw the subtle changes in his children, a tentative smile from Lily, a less frequent whimper from Thomas, small victories that fueled his resolve. During these interactions, Albright would often hover, her presence a tangible shadow, her manufactured sweetness cloying. She would try to interject, to draw the children's attention away from Arthur, to reassert her control. "Lily, dear, don't bother your father with such trivial things," she might say, or, "Thomas needs his nap, Arthur. You're overstimulating him." But Arthur, now seeing through her thinly veiled manipulations, would meet her gaze with a calm, unwavering stare, a silent dismissal that left her momentarily flustered. He was no longer the grief-stricken, oblivious employer. He was a father, fully present, fully aware, and fiercely protective. He even began to install additional discreet cameras throughout the house, ensuring every corner was monitored, every interaction recorded. He wanted an airtight case, not just for justice, but to ensure no other child would ever suffer at her hands. The house, once a symbol of his success, and later a monument to his sorrow, was now transforming into a fortress of truth, a sanctuary where love would eventually cast out all shadows. The days that followed were a delicate dance of deception and discovery, a silent war waged within the opulent confines of the Sterling mansion. Arthur, now a vigilant sentinel, observed Albright with an almost predatory focus, noticing the subtle cracks in her carefully constructed facade. Her manufactured sweetness began to curdle, replaced by a thinly veiled frustration whenever Arthur intervened in the children's routine or offered them comfort. He saw her eyes narrow, her lips press into a thin line, whenever Lily, emboldened by her father's unwavering presence, would share a small, innocent detail about her day, details that sometimes contradicted Albright's previous narratives. The new, discreet cameras Arthur had installed became his silent allies, capturing not only Albright's moments of unguarded cruelty, but also her increasingly desperate attempts to maintain control over the household and its finances. He watched as she subtly diverted household funds, inflated invoices for services, and even attempted to access his private accounts, each transgression a fresh betrayal that solidified his resolve. One evening, as Arthur helped Lily with a puzzle, building a whimsical castle of vibrant blocks, Albright approached, her voice cloyingly sweet, a tone that now grated on Arthur's nerves. She suggested that Lily was tired, that perhaps it was time for her to be put to bed, even though it was still early and Lily was clearly enjoying her father's company. "Lily needs her rest, Arthur. She's been rather excitable today," Albright said, casting a pointed glance at the little girl, a subtle threat lingering beneath her words. Lily, sensing the familiar chill, instinctively recoiled, her small body tensing. But Arthur, no longer the oblivious and grief-stricken man, met Albright's gaze with a calm, unwavering intensity. "Lily is perfectly fine, Albright. We are simply enjoying our time together. We will decide when she is ready for bed," he stated, his voice low but firm, a clear boundary drawn in the sand. He put a protective arm around Lily, whose small hand immediately reached for his, clinging to him as if he were her anchor. Albright's smile faltered, her eyes flashing with a flicker of resentment before she retreated, her movements stiff, a clear acknowledgement that her reign of quiet terror was drawing to a close. Arthur continued to spend every possible moment with his children, nurturing the fragile bonds that had been so cruelly strained. He read to Lily, his voice a soothing balm, and together they explored the sprawling gardens, discovering hidden nooks and creating new, joyful memories. He watched as the light slowly returned to Lily's eyes, her laughter, once so rare, now echoing through the house with a joyous abandon that made his heart swell with a bittersweet mixture of relief and regret. Thomas, too, flourished under his father's constant, loving care. The faint bruise on his cheek had long since faded, replaced by the healthy glow of a cherished child. He would gurgle happily, reaching for Arthur's face with tiny, grasping fingers, his innocent gaze filled with an unadulterated trust that pierced Arthur's soul and reaffirmed his purpose. The house, once a silent tomb of his grief, was slowly transforming into a vibrant home, filled with the precious sounds of childhood and the comforting rhythm of unconditional love. The evidence against Albright mounted, an undeniable mountain of truth that Arthur meticulously compiled. He discovered forged documents, bank statements that showed large, unauthorized transfers from his personal accounts to a shell company in Albright's name, and even a meticulously crafted will, designed to grant her a substantial portion of his estate should anything unforeseen happen to him or the children. The chilling audacity of her scheme sent shivers down his spine, revealing a woman far more dangerous and calculating than he had ever imagined. He consulted with his most trusted legal counsel, a sharp, empathetic lawyer named Eleanor Vance, who listened with a grave expression as Arthur recounted the harrowing tale, presenting the hidden camera footage, the letters from his wife, and the financial discrepancies. Eleanor assured him that they had an ironclad case, a case that would not only bring Albright to justice, but also ensure the children's safety and well-being. Arthur felt a sense of grim satisfaction as he prepared for the inevitable confrontation, knowing that the truth, long buried beneath layers of grief and manipulation, was finally ready to emerge. He envisioned the moment Albright's carefully constructed world would crumble, her lies exposed, her malevolent intentions laid bare for all to see. Yet, beneath the righteous anger, a profound sadness lingered. He grieved not only for his children's lost innocence, but also for the precious time he had squandered, lost in the shadows of his own sorrow. But now, armed with courage and fueled by an unyielding love, Arthur was ready to fight, not just for justice, but for the future of his family, a future he was determined to fill with light, healing, and the boundless embrace of a father's devotion. The stage was set, the players in place, and the final act of this painful drama was about to unfold, bringing with it the promise of redemption and the unwavering power of truth. The tension within the Sterling household became a palpable, suffocating force. A silent battle of wills played out in the stately rooms. Albright, sensing the tightening net around her, grew increasingly erratic, her composure fraying at the edges. Her attempts at feigned concern for the children now sounded hollow, her smiles brittle and forced, unable to mask the malevolent glint in her eyes when she thought Arthur wasn't looking. She would still try to insert herself into their routines, suggesting an early bedtime for Lily, or a strict feeding schedule for Thomas. But Arthur's calm, unwavering gaze and gentle but firm retorts consistently thwarted her. He would simply say, "Thank you, Albright, but I have it handled," or, "The children are perfectly content with me." His voice devoid of anger, yet laced with an undeniable authority that left her no room for argument. These small daily victories were not just about asserting his paternal role. They were about reclaiming the emotional space for his children, slowly pushing back the darkness that had encroached upon their innocence. Lily, no longer shrinking into herself, began to blossom under her father's constant, protective presence. Her drawings, once filled with shadowy figures, now depicted brightly colored flowers and laughing stick figures, often holding hands with a tall, protective man. She would recount her day to Arthur with an innocent candor, sometimes mentioning Albright's past cruelties in passing, not out of malice, but as simple facts of her recent memory. "Albright used to make me eat all my vegetables even if I didn't like them, and sometimes she would say I was a naughty girl for crying," Lily might confide, her small voice a stark reminder of the emotional wounds that were still mending. Arthur would listen, his heart aching with every revelation, yet filled with an immense gratitude for her burgeoning trust. He would reassure her, telling her that it was perfectly all right to express her feelings, that her voice mattered, and that he would always be there to listen and protect her. Thomas, too, thrived. his baby giggles echoing through the once somber halls, his tiny arms reaching instinctively for Arthur whenever he entered the room, a profound testament to the safety and love he now felt. Eleanor Vance, Arthur's trusted legal counsel, had meticulously reviewed the mountain of evidence, her expression a mix of professional resolve and genuine human empathy. She confirmed that the hidden camera footage, combined with his wife's letters and the irrefutable financial discrepancies, formed an unassailable case. The forged will, discovered among Albright's hidden effects during a discreet search arranged by Eleanor, was the final, chilling piece of the puzzle, revealing the full extent of Albright's avarice and her calculated long-term plan to usurp his family's legacy. Eleanor explained the legal avenues available, the process of involving Child Protective Services, and the criminal charges Albright would undoubtedly face. She assured Arthur that the focus would always remain on the children's well-being, ensuring their testimony, if needed, would be handled with the utmost care and sensitivity. The path to justice was clear, albeit emotionally arduous, and Arthur felt a steel resolve settle in his heart, ready to face the storm. The air in the house grew heavier, thick with unspoken anticipation. Arthur knew the time for a formal confrontation was drawing near, but he wanted to ensure every detail was in place, every possible loophole closed. He spent his days not just with the children, but also meticulously cataloging every piece of evidence, cross-referencing dates from his wife's diary with the camera footage, building an airtight timeline of abuse and betrayal. He even managed to subtly retrieve some of Albright's personal effects, including a small, worn photo album hidden in her room, which contained pictures of her with another family, a family she had clearly abandoned, perhaps another victim of her manipulative schemes. This discovery painted an even darker picture of Albright's past, suggesting a pattern of deceit and opportunism that stretched far beyond the Sterling estate. He realized her motives were not just about money, but perhaps a deep-seated resentment, a desire to seize and control the lives she envied. Albright, meanwhile, became increasingly agitated, her usual meticulousness giving way to small, noticeable errors. She would forget simple instructions, leave things out of place, and her eyes would constantly dart around, as if expecting something to spring out from the shadows. She tried to engage Arthur in casual conversation, attempting to gauge his mood, to understand if her carefully constructed facade was still intact. "You seem much happier, Arthur. The children are certainly thriving," she might say, her voice laced with an artificial cheerfulness, a desperate attempt to maintain the illusion of her benevolent role. But Arthur would simply offer a polite, non-committal response, his gaze unwavering, his inner resolve impenetrable. He saw her desperation, the fear beginning to creep into her usually controlled demeanor, and he knew the moment of reckoning was imminent. The tranquil facade of the Sterling mansion was about to shatter, revealing the painful truths that had been hidden for too long, paving the way for a justice that was long overdue. The children, now clinging to their father like lifelines, were unknowingly awaiting the dawn of their new, truly safe beginning. The final arrangements were meticulously laid out in Eleanor Vance's hushed office, a sanctuary of legal strategy, where Arthur felt the weight of his task both daunting and profoundly necessary. Eleanor, her gaze unwavering and empathetic, reiterated the strength of their evidence, assuring him that justice, though sometimes slow, would undeniably prevail. They discussed the precise timing of the intervention, the involvement of Child Protective Services to ensure Lily and Thomas were handled with the utmost sensitivity and care, and the legal ramifications for Albright, which Eleanor predicted would be severe. Arthur listened, his own voice steady as he confirmed every detail, his mind clear, his heart a complex tapestry of sorrow for what his children had endured, and a fierce, unyielding determination to protect them. The forged will, the pilfered funds, the chilling footage, each piece was a testament to Albright's insidious betrayal, and Arthur felt a cold resolve harden within him, knowing that this confrontation was not just about retribution, but about reclaiming the sanctity of his family's future. Back at the Sterling mansion, Albright's carefully constructed composure was rapidly disintegrating, replaced by a restless anxiety that manifested in subtle yet telling ways. Her movements became less fluid, more jerky. Her eyes, always watchful, now darted nervously around the grand rooms, as if expecting the very walls to betray her. She made a desperate, final attempt to access Arthur's primary investment accounts, a move he had anticipated and expertly blocked with Eleanor's guidance, leaving her frustrated and bewildered. He watched her from a distance, a silent observer of her unraveling, seeing not just the manipulator, but the desperate, cornered woman beneath, a chilling reminder of the destructive power of unchecked greed and resentment. Her attempts to engage him in conversation now felt forced, almost frantic. Her questions thinly veiled probes into his activities, searching for any sign that her dark secrets remained hidden. One afternoon, Albright, with a forced cheerfulness that did not quite reach her eyes, approached Lily, who was drawing intently at a small table in the sun-drenched living room. She offered Lily a piece of candy, a gesture she had once used to placate and control. But now, Lily simply looked up at her, a flicker of apprehension in her young eyes, and then turned to Arthur, who was observing from the doorway. "No, thank you, Albright," Lily said softly, her small voice imbued with a newfound confidence, a direct result of her father's constant presence and reassurance. Arthur stepped forward, a gentle smile on his face, placing a comforting hand on Lily's shoulder. "Lily has had enough sweets for today, Albright," he stated, his tone firm yet devoid of aggression, a quiet authority that left no room for argument. Albright's smile vanished, her lips tightening into a thin, almost imperceptible line, and she retreated without another word, her shoulders slumped, a clear acknowledgement of her diminishing power. Arthur's heart swelled with a profound sense of purpose as he witnessed these small, yet monumental shifts in his children. Lily's laughter now resonated through the house, a pure, unburdened sound that chased away the lingering echoes of her past sorrow. She would often seek out Arthur, her small hand finding his, her innocent questions about the world a balm to his healing soul. Thomas, too, had transformed, his cries replaced by contented coos and joyful babbling, his tiny hands reaching for Arthur with an unwavering trust that melted away the last vestiges of his father's guilt. He would spend hours simply holding his baby boy, inhaling the sweet scent of his hair, feeling the gentle rhythm of his breath against his chest, a tangible connection that reaffirmed the boundless, unconditional love that now filled their home. The house, once a monument to his grief, had truly become a sanctuary, a vibrant space where healing blossomed under the warmth of his renewed devotion. As the day of reckoning drew closer, Arthur found a quiet strength in the love that now permeated his life. He knew the impending confrontation would be painful, a stark unveiling of ugly truths, but it was a necessary step towards the complete restoration of his family's peace. He envisioned a future where Lily and Thomas would grow up surrounded by genuine affection, free from the shadows of manipulation and neglect. He had learned a hard, invaluable lesson about presence, about the irreplaceable bond between a parent and child, and he was determined to honor his wife's memory by being the father she had always known he could be. The meticulous planning, the gathering of evidence, the quiet vigilance, it all culminated in this moment, a testament to his transformation from a man lost in sorrow to a fiercely protective patriarch. The stage was set, not for an ending, but for a new beginning, a dawn of truth that promised to cleanse their home and illuminate their path forward, guided by courage and an unyielding love. The moment arrived with the quiet precision of a well-executed plan. On a crisp autumn morning, as Albright prepared breakfast in the kitchen, oblivious to the storm gathering around her, The front door opened, and Arthur stepped in, flanked by Eleanor Vance and two plainclothes officers from Child Protective Services. His gaze was firm, resolute, devoid of the lingering sorrow that had once clouded his eyes. Albright turned, a forced smile on her face, but it withered as she saw the grim expressions, the official demeanor of the newcomers. Eleanor stepped forward, her voice calm but authoritative, stating the purpose of their visit, outlining the charges, the irrefutable evidence of financial fraud, abuse, and the manipulation of Arthur's estate. Albright's face contorted, her carefully constructed facade shattering into 1,000 pieces. She began to deny, to rage, her voice rising to a shrill crescendo, accusing Arthur of fabricating lies, of being an unfit father, of imagining things in his grief. Her outburst was a torrent of venom, a desperate, cornered animal lashing out, but her words held no power, no truth, against the weight of the evidence they presented, including the chilling footage that played silently on a tablet held by one of the officers. The children, safely with a trusted neighbor, were spared the raw ugliness of the scene, a small mercy Arthur had meticulously arranged. Albright was swiftly taken into custody, her protests echoing emptily in the now silent halls of the mansion. A profound sense of relief washed over Arthur, a cleansing wave that swept away the last vestiges of fear and doubt. The house, once heavy with the weight of unseen cruelty, now breathed a sigh of liberation. Lily and Thomas returned later that day, their faces beaming with an unburdened joy Arthur hadn't seen in far too long. Lily, clutching her favorite teddy bear, ran into his arms, burying her face in his chest, a silent declaration of her newfound safety. Thomas, sensing the shift, gurgled happily from his crib, his tiny hands reaching for his father, an innocent beacon of hope in the quiet aftermath. The legal proceedings moved forward with relentless efficiency, Eleanor Vance ensuring every aspect of justice was served. Albright's past deceptions and crimes were fully exposed, leading to a just and undeniable consequence for her actions, a clear message that the darkness she had woven would not go unpunished. 2 years later, the Sterling estate was no longer a grand, empty shell, but a vibrant, living home, brimming with laughter and the warmth of a family truly reunited. Arthur, no longer consumed by grief, had fully embraced his role as a loving, present father. His office, once a sanctuary from his family, was now a place for shared stories, for Lily to draw her colorful pictures, and for Thomas to play with his blocks. They spent countless hours in the sprawling gardens, Arthur teaching Lily the names of flowers, their hands covered in rich earth as they planted new life, a tangible symbol of their own flourishing. Mealtimes were boisterous affairs, filled with chatter and the clinking of cutlery, a stark contrast to the quiet, tense meals of the past. Lily, now a bright and confident 8-year-old, excelled in school, her imagination soaring, her spirit free. Thomas, a curious and energetic toddler, explored every corner of their home, his infectious giggles a constant melody. Arthur often found himself simply watching them, his heart overflowing with a gratitude so immense it brought tears to his eyes, a silent promise to his departed wife that their children were cherished, safe, and profoundly loved. He had found his purpose not in the boardrooms of his empire, but in the tender embrace of his children, rebuilding their lives, brick by precious brick, with truth, courage, and an unconditional love that transcended all pain. This story reminds us that even in the face of immense sorrow and betrayal, the human spirit possesses an incredible capacity for healing and redemption. It asks us to consider the hidden struggles that might be occurring behind closed doors and the profound impact of our presence and vigilance. What would you do to protect a child from harm? How far would you go to ensure their safety and happiness? Share your thoughts and let us know what moments in this story resonated most deeply with you. May this narrative serve as a poignant reminder that while evil may cast its shadows, it will ultimately be met with justice, and that goodness will always find its reward. For justice is not merely a legal process, but a profound act built on unwavering truth, boundless courage, and the enduring, transformative power of unconditional love.